I'm going to marry the woman I cheated on you with, and I want a divorce.
My husband said this without hesitation. And finally, he said something like this.
And because I'm getting married again, I need you to look after my parent.
What? I'm counting on you, okay? My mother-in-law, who do not blame her own son for having an affair and try to depend on me. I cannot be with such insane people. So I told them something. Then my mother-in-law turned pale and apologized to me sincerely. I am so sorry. My name is Vicky. I'm 40 years of age and works a part-time job. My husband Andy and I have been married for about 16 years. We met through work. We were co-workers at the same company. We started working together on the same project and went out for drinks. We grew closer and ended up dating. My husband was 5 years older than me, and from my point of view at the time, he seems to be a mature man. He was funny and cool, and I fell in love with him at once. We then went on several dates and ended up having a relationship. And after about a year of dating, he proposed to me and we got married. I was very happy to marry the man I loved. I was only 24 years old at the time, but I still decided to get married. So I guess I really loved him. After that, I was happily married with my husband and working together. Then, after 3 years of marriage, our son Daniel was born. He was so cute, thinking he was an angel when he was just born. We were happy, and we were building a good family. I resigned from my job after the birth to focus on raising our son. I thought it was good that I quit my job because I was able to spend a lot of time with my son. And I had a rather good relationship with my in-laws. Every time I went to visit my in-laws, they smiled kindly at me and made me feel comfortable. I thought that I was really living a happy married life. My parents-in-law are very fond of their grandson Daniel. They often came to our house and we went to visit them. Then my husband made this suggestion.
Would you like to move in with my parents? So that Daniel and my parents will see each other every day. We could live in a big house without paying rent.
I thought that was a good idea. Because my in-laws and I had a good relationship at that time. My son is going to grow up. Then it would be better for him to live freely in a bigger house. I thought so and agreed to live with them. However, I regretted my decision at the time. At first, I thought that living together with them was going very well. My parents-in-law seemed very happy to be able to live with their grandchildren. And my husband seems relaxed to be back in his parents' house. I tried my best to do housework as a housewife. My parents-in-law and my husband never complained to me. My son grew up to be a good boy, and we all watched him grow up. However, there was something that bothered me. My parents-in-law spoiled my son too much. They bought him everything he wanted and gave him allowance without our permission. I saw this and thought it was not good for my son. I felt it was not good for his education. So one day, I told my parents-in-law, "Can you please not buy Daniel too many things?" When I said this, my in-laws' eyes widened and they became angry. "You are depriving us of a joy of spending time with our grandchild."
Do you think you are the only one raising him?
They were the ones who yelled at me like that. But as a mother, I wanted to educate him properly, so I didn't take a step back. I didn't mean it like that. Of course you're free to play with Daniel. I'm just asking you not to buy things for him without permission.
You know, if Daniel wanted something, you'd buy it for him, wouldn't you?
Yes, and how will you take the responsibility if we don't buy it, and it makes him sad and he doesn't like us? It seems that the in-laws buy things for their grandchild because they want him to like them. But what if that makes my son selfish? How are they going to take responsibility? The parents-in-law are very kind. Ira explained to Daniel that his grandparents is very kind and loves him. Please don't buy him anything like that. Even though I had said all that, my in-laws did not seem to be convinced. When my husband came home from work, they started talking to him as if it was my fault. Vicky told me not to play with my grandchild.
She wants to be alone with him.
She wants to fend to him all for herself. I was surprised to hear my in-laws say something completely different, and my husband took them at their word.
Hey, what's going on? You're being mean to my mom and dad.
Just wait a minute. I didn't do anything like that. I gave my husband a good explanation. I said I wanted them to stop buying him too much stuff for the sake of our child. But my husband believed what my in-laws said, not what I said.
Don't be silly. Don't lie to me like that.
I'm not lying.
Then you are saying my parents are lying.
My husband's eyes widened, and he became too angry. In the end, no matter how much I tried to explain, he believed my in-laws' side of the story.
I never thought you were such a terrible woman.
Since then, my husband and my in-laws have been cold toward me. Your food tastes bad.
You serve fish too often. Don't treat us like we're old people, you idiot. Don't bother mom and dad. You really are a useless wife.
These are the kind of things my parents-in-law say to me every day. How can they continue to abuse me like that? I think it is mentally exhausting to be abused by people. I even considered divorce. But my son was only about 5 years old at the time. I have been a housewife since my son was born, and I had not worked for a long time. I was also worried about whether I would be able to find a new job. I had no assurance that I would be able to take him with me when I left. In my current situation, my in-laws can take care of him. My husband is likely to decide that he should take him in instead of me because he has a steady salary. Just because I'm not getting along with my in-laws, I didn't want to give up my son. So I had to just bear with it and not get a divorce. They took advantage of the fact that I was not resisting. My in-laws and my husband started to say more and more terrible things to me. They were so abusive to me that I wondered if they were really the same people. So I started not to think of them as people at all. It makes me feel a little better. That's how I lived my hard life day by day. No matter how badly my husband and in-laws treated me, I thought it would be better if I could watch my son grow up by my side. My son grew up so fast that he went to elementary school. I was worried that he might become selfish because my in-laws had given him too many things. He is a good listener at home, and it seems to be the same at school. When his homeroom teacher told me that he was a very kind and considerate child, I was extremely happy, and my son was studying hard and doing well in school. But for some reason, my in-laws made it sound like it was their achievement.
It's because of our good teaching, isn't it?
That's right. We praise and develop him. We buy him what he wants. That's what's important. I don't understand how buying him what he wants will improve his grades. But my parents-in-law seem to want to involve themselves in everything. I was just trying to give them credit for their son's own hard work while listening to them appropriately. I never tried to get his affection by buying things like my in-laws did. My son still adored me. He would always say, "Mom, Mom," and tell me about things that happened at school. I guess my in-laws didn't like that. When my son reached the middle school years of elementary school, the amount of things he needed got expensive. Until then, it was just sweets and toys. But at that time, they bought him the latest game consoles and software. No matter how much I tried to stop my parents-in-law, it was not enough. I told my son not to play too much and to be punctual and keep his promises. But even then, my in-laws were a pain in the ass.
Don't you feel sorry for him? That you have to stop him from playing when he still wants to play?
We bought it for Daniel because we wanted him to enjoy it. I reported it to my husband, and he yelled at me, which became the usual norm. I was already completely disgusted, and already completely dumbfounded. All I wanted was for my son to grow up to be a good man. That was how I spent my days. Time went by, and my son turned 13 years old. He was now a junior high school student, and as he entered puberty, I faced a lot of difficulties as a parent. While I was thinking about this, an unexpected problem occurred. It was a holiday. My husband suddenly called me into his bedroom and said he wanted to talk to me. I said, "What on earth do you want me here for?" I was completely out of touch with my husband, so I was sure he had no intention of doing so. As I was thinking about this, my husband suddenly made a surprising statement.
I'm going to marry the woman I'm cheating on you with.
What? Divorce? I was surprised at an unexpected words coming from my husband.
Well, it's no wonder you're surprised. I've been trying to keep it from you, but I thought it was time to tell you.
My husband said that to me without hesitation. Why did he decide to publicly tell me that he was having an affair? Well, I don't know what a stupid person thinks. And then, he even said something like this.
And because I will be marrying someone else, I'm going to ask you to take care of my parents too.
What? Wait a minute. We are getting a divorce, right? Then I will have to live with Daniel, won't I? When I said that, my husband said something outrageous.
I'm the one who is leaving.
What? What do you mean?
I'm going to leave this place and start a new married life with my new wife. I'm worried about my parents and the kid, so I'm leaving you in charge of the house. You have a house and you get to live with Daniel, so it's a win-win, right?
I was shocked. It was not a win-win situation at all. I was at a loss for words.
So I will tell my parents about it right away.
My husband said, and suddenly started to head for the living room. I hurried after him. He gave the same explanation to my parents-in-law as he had given to me. I thought they would be angry with him. My in-laws were also crazy people. They said, "Yes, we will miss you, but it can't be helped."
I agree. I think it's better for newlyweds to spend time alone together. We'll be fine as long as this woman takes care of us.
My in-laws couldn't blame their own son for having an affair and tried to rely on me.
If you want to leave, I will make sure you leave Daniel behind.
If you want to leave, you're the only one who leaves. I can't be with these insane people. I told them something. Let me tell you something. I can claim alimony because it is my husband's fault and I'm divorced. And I have a better chance of getting my son.
What? What do you mean?
Because my husband committed adultery. Isn't it better for him to live with someone who hasn't committed adultery?
Wait a minute. So you are living with Daniel?
Yes, of course I will.
We won't let you. Let's ask Daniel then.
My in-laws and my husband said, and went to call my son. They were not going to tell him everything, were they? My son came into the living room.
What's wrong? Dad and Mom are getting a divorce.
What?
So Daniel, how would you like to live here with your grandparents?
Such an explanation and question was unfair. I quickly said the important part. You better explain to him that you are divorcing me because of your infidelity. When I said this, my husband and in-laws were in a panic.
Daniel is just a junior high school student.
Yes, he is. Why are you trying to shock him? My parents-in-law and husband blamed me. But before I could retort, my son opened his mouth.
You're the one who caused the shock, aren't you? Why are you all blaming my mother? What? I mean, I could hear you all arguing earlier. You guys are not sure which one I'm going to follow if you get divorced. It's definitely my mother.
Daniel, why?
Don't you want to live with Grandma and Grandpa? You were nice to me, but you were terrible to my mother, weren't you? To be honest, I couldn't forgive you for that. All of you, Grandma, Grandpa, and Dad. I despised you, and I despised my father for not protecting my mother and blaming her for everything.
Despise? My in-laws looked shocked.
Anyway, I have one answer. I'm living here with my mother. From now on, I'm going to take care of her.
Daniel, I was so happy that my son was on my side. Then my in-laws turned pale and did their best to apologize to me.
We are so sorry.
I apologize, so please don't leave this house. I don't want my grandchild to leave. My parents-in-law pleaded with me, and my husband.
Please, you guys stay here. If you don't stay here, my plan will be ruined. My plan is to live here.
My son and I were not going to give in at any cost. Daniel and I will no longer have anything to do with you. We will definitely be leaving this house, I said, and began to pack up our belongings. My son joined me in packing his bag with only what he needed for the time being.
Where are you going?
My parents' house.
If we go to your parents' house, Daniel will have to change schools. That would be a pity.
My husband said things like that and tried to keep us here until the end.
I would rather change schools than stay here forever. You should first be sorry for what you have done. Do you have any idea how much of the terrible things you have done to your family?
My husband is admonished that way by a child who has just started junior high school. I found it hilarious and struggled to hold back my laughter. My husband looked down, his face turning blue. My parents-in-law were so exhausted that they just slumped down on the floor. My son and I left the house, with him by my side, and drove to my parents' house. I then hired a lawyer and demanded a divorce from my husband, alimony and child support. Of course, I also demanded alimony from the adulterer. My husband thought that if we stayed with his parents, he would not have to pay child support. However, everything did not go as planned, and as a result, he had to pay alimony and child support. In addition, the adulterous partner told him that the story was different, and he was eventually dumped. He is currently staying with his parents and putting most of his income towards alimony and child support. By the way, I told my in-laws' neighbors about the incident. I also sent a content-certified letter to my ex-husband's workplace. People around my ex-husband know about the affair. My ex-husband and in-laws are being looked at coldly by everyone around them. They have been cut off from almost everyone and have become isolated. My ex-husband was told by his parents, "It is your fault. It has become impossible for us to see Daniel." I heard that he was stuffed.
My earnings have made you guys rich until now.
My ex-husband sent me a message saying sorry and that he wanted to get back together with me. I only read the messages and blocked my ex-husband. I also blocked all incoming calls so that he could not contact me at all. And after I went back to my parents' house with my son, I started working as a clerk at the company that my father knew. Now I'm raising my son as a single mother with the support of my parents. My son has remained a kind-hearted child despite all that has happened. He seems to be adjusting well to his new school. I will continue to work as hard as I can and watch my son grow up. Here, Lee. Time for breakfast. Oh, what? What that look? That's enough for the wounded, right? Daughters-in-law that don't work are like pigs, right? My mother-in-law said mockingly to me, who was unable to do housework because of a broken wrist. What she held out before me was, to my surprise, food scraps, a plate of banana peels, fish bones, coffee grounds, etc., all jumbled together. I glanced at my husband, who was pretending not to notice and eating a delicious-looking piece of boiled fish. This is just too much. When I raised my voice in protest, my husband put down his utensils and said,
Mom is right, isn't she? If you can do the housework even though you're a housewife, you don't deserve to exist.
I was blindsided by his words. My husband and mother-in-law ignored me and resumed eating happily together. I felt miserable, and at the same time, a thought occurred to me. My name is Lee, and I will be 40 years old this year. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I used to live with my husband Ben and our son, who is in 6th grade, in a rented apartment. Currently, we live with my mother-in-law at their house. When we first got married, we lived separately from my parents-in-law in close proximity. But when my father-in-law passed away last year, we started living together. This was Ben's suggestion. My mother-in-law is still very active and does not need nursing care. However, Ben thought it would be lonely to live alone in a big house, so he decided to move in with her. I didn't feel particularly bad about moving in with her. We used to go back and forth a lot before we moved in together, and since her house is in the same school district, I was in favor of moving in with her. And my parents' house is far away, but my brother and his wife live with them there, so there was no problem. Finally, we started living together. My mother-in-law was very supportive of the housework and shared it with me. My son seemed to like my mother-in-law, and I often saw them playing together. To be honest, I was relieved. I was still anxious. I wondered if we would be able to get along even though we were family. That's what I thought. However, when I opened the door, life together was going well. I was glad I took Ben's suggestion. I thought so. But it was 3 months after we started living together that I first felt a sense of discomfort. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm cooking today, so can I ask you to do the laundry? I asked in my usual tone. I'm not feeling well today. I will leave it to you. With that, my mother-in-law plopped down on the sofa and started watching a variety show. I guess there are days like that. I did as I was told and did all the chores. However, the next day and the day after that, my mother-in-law did not do any housework. In the beginning, she would say, I have to go out now. She gave various reasons, such as I'm busy with my things, but gradually, that stopped and she began to take it out on me for no reason at all. I thought it was a little strange at this point, but I did not protest strongly. Up to this point, I had been doing all the housework for 3 people by myself. Although, the addition of my mother-in-law had increased the number of household chores for 4. I did not consider it a particularly heavy burden, but I was naive. She took advantage of the fact that I didn't say anything to her, and she gradually showed her true colors. Lee, I told you to wash all my shoes, didn't I? I also told you to go sell my old clothes, and I asked you to send out my summer greeting cards to all my friends. Why didn't you finish them at all? Oh, I'm sorry. Yesterday and today, we had the parents' meeting of my son's baseball team. When I replied, my mother-in-law glared at me and became angry. Don't make excuses. Just do it now. If you don't go to bed, it will be done by the end of the day. That day was the beginning of my mother-in-law's abuse of me. I was perplexed by the drastic change in her attitude from when we first started living together. And yet, she was still the same kind and good grandmother to my son, so I didn't understand what was going on. I wondered why this had happened, and decided to talk to Ben about it. But Ben said,
I think it's your fault for being so slow.
He would only say in half-jokingly. One day, after such a situation had continued, It was the day when, after a while, my son was on a school trip. The day went by quickly, as I was thinking about whether he was having a good time and whether I hoped he came back without any injuries. I was about to take a bath and go to bed when Ben called out to me.
Oh, I want some ice cream. Lee, go get me some. The one that's only available at the convenience store.
It was 11 p.m. and raining. What? If you want ice cream so bad, why don't you just go get it yourself? As I said this, Ben suddenly shouted out loud,
I told you to go. Why can't you listen to me?
I had never seen Ben yell before, so I froze in surprise and couldn't move. Then my mother-in-law came after me.
You're so cocky, even for a daughter-in-law. You should have just gone shopping like he told you.
I was so exhausted by their stares that I put on a jumper over my nightclothes and ran out of the house. It was dark outside, and the rain beat hard against my umbrella. I shrank back to avoid getting wet as much as possible and headed for the convenience store. How did this happen? The convenience store was about 10 minutes away from our house, but that was only if I rode my bicycle. It was raining, and I couldn't ride my bike, so it took longer than that. By the time I finally arrived at the convenience store, my pants were soaking wet. I bought an ice cream and left the convenience store. I can't wait to go home, and I want to take a bath again. With these thoughts in mind, I walked faster than when I first arrived. I could see my house soon. That's when it happened. I was sprayed by a car coming from behind, and I jumped in surprise. I quickly put my right hand on the ground. It was a mistake. I felt pain in my wrist like I had never experienced before. As it turned out, I had broken my right wrist. I rushed to the emergency room where I was treated and told that I had broken my right wrist. After treatment, I looked at my phone and saw that I had received a large number of calls from Ben and my mother-in-law. I rushed to call Ben. Hello, Ben. I broke my wrist. I'm at the hospital. Then, Ben opened his mouth and said, Where is the ice cream? What? Oh, ice cream? Sorry, it melted. Normally, I would have thought he would be worried by my health, but he quickly responded,
What? What that? I was looking forward to it. You can't even go shopping properly.
With that, Ben hung up the phone. I was going to ask him to pick me up. I called Ben several times after that, but he never answered. I called a cab and went home alone, half crying. When I arrived home, both my mother-in-law and Ben were already asleep and did not greet me. I wanted to talk to Ben, so I went to our bedroom. I noticed a sign on the door.
Dear Lee, do not open the door. Do not wake me, it said. Feeling miserable, I took a shower and fell asleep alone on the living room couch. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of my mother-in-law's voice. Honey, you are disturbing me by sleeping here. Here, I made you breakfast. Go eat it. You can't do your chores anyway, can you? My mother-in-law pulled me by the arm and I sat up. I couldn't understand what was going on because I had just woken up from sleep, but I wondered if my mother-in-law was concerned about me in her own way. At the dining table, Ben was already there in a suit, poking a boiled fish. Here, Lee, breakfast is ready. What was presented to me was food scraps. A plate of banana peels, fish bones, coffee grounds, etc., all mixed together. Oh, what is it? What's that face? Isn't this enough for the injured? A wife who doesn't work is like a pig, right? My mother-in-law laughed at me mockingly. I glanced at my husband, who was pretending to be normal and eating some delicious-looking boiled fish. Why don't you cover for me?
Why do you give me such a hard time? This is just too much. When I finally raised my voice in protest, my husband quietly put down his utensils and said,
My mother is right, isn't she? If you can't do the housework even though you're a housewife, you don't deserve to exist.
My mother-in-law and Ben looked at each other and laughed. I was stunned and unable to say anything. But Ben and my mother-in-law continued to press me. I'm not sure if she had broken a bone in the first place. That's why I don't like young women these days.
Yes, that's right. And it's because of her bad behavior that she breaks her bone.
Their voices became distant. Then I felt my head heat up and then cool down. I've reached my limit. I couldn't take it any longer. Do you think you can get away with treating me so roughly and saying such crazy things? I will get even. I decided and stood up, holding the plate with the garbage on it. But what would be the most effective way? I had no idea, since I had never tried to get back at anyone before. For now, gathering information, I guess, I began to investigate their weaknesses. While doing housework with my broken hand, I searched all over the house while my mother-in-law and Ben were out. I also hired a detective and began to investigate the two of them there. I thought it would be foolish to lose my savings from my bachelorette days by doing this, but if I was going to do it, I wanted to do it thoroughly. I recorded the terrible things that Ben and my mother-in-law had done to me, and waited patiently for the right moment. When my broken bones had almost completely healed, the time for payback came. One morning, my mother-in-law moved from her bedroom to the living room. My mother-in-law's bedroom was on the second floor, and the living room was on the first floor. Inevitably, she had to go down the stairs. She seems to sleep on the way down, and a terrible sound echoed through the house. My son and I rushed toward the stairs, but it was already too late. My mother-in-law was lying in a heap at the bottom of the stairs. We rushed to the hospital for treatment, where she was diagnosed with a broken ankle. My mother-in-law looked dejected and was muffled and silent. She would occasionally mutter, "Oh, it hurts." That night, when I was able to use both hands to my satisfaction, I put my skills to the test and prepared dinner. The whole family was at the table. It was a disaster, wasn't it? Mother, please cheer yourself up with delicious food. I smiled and put the food in front of my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law's face turned pale, clearly upset. What the hell? Stop harassing me! I'm injured! What I served as her supper was food scraps, banana peels, fish bones, coffee grounds, and various other garbage were mixed together and added on top. I decided to return the favor that my mother-in-law had done to me before. Harassment? I'm just serving food for the injured. My mother-in-law was trembling.
Stop it! Don't you dare mock my mother!
As I had expected, Ben also started to get angry. I put a plate in front of him as well. Of course, there was garbage on it. Garbage is good enough for a man who can't protect his wife as a husband. Ben's mouth was agape, and he couldn't say anything. I decided to take advantage of the opportunity to say what I wanted to say. Oh, you're so pale, Mom. You broke your bone. It's because you don't work hard enough. Well, I guess you break bones because you don't work hard enough. What do you think, Ben? That's exactly what he said to me when I broke my arm. You! Shut up and listen to me. Who do you think you are? I don't want a daughter-in-law like you. Get your stuff together and get out of here.
That's right, that's right. You're not fit to be my wife. Get out.
I did as I was told, packed my bags, and left home. I was willing to get a divorce. They wanted me to leave my son behind, but I adamantly refused. It would be bad for my son's upbringing if he stayed in a house like this. I decided to evacuate for the time being. A few days had passed since I left home. My own parents and my brother and sister-in-law were willing to accept me and my son. I was also grateful that my brother and his wife's children were willing to play with my son since it was summer vacation. But what should we do now? As I was thinking about this, I suddenly remembered. I had left the apron my son had given me for Mother's Day at my parents-in-law's house. I could give up the other things, but not that one. I left my son with my parents and returned to my parents-in-law's house alone. It was a good opportunity to talk about the future. With this in mind, I drove to my in-laws' house. It took about an hour and a half on the highway. I arrived at my parents-in-law's house. I tried to stop the car, but another car had already been parked there. It was a car I had never seen before. Wondering, I decided to return to my in-laws' house after parking the car at the nearby toll parking lot. The front door was unlocked, so I quietly opened the door and went inside. There I found a pair of shoes belonging to a woman I did not realize. I wondered if a friend of my mother-in-law's was visiting. If so, I might not be able to have a deep conversation with her. I decided to just collect the apron and go home. With this in mind, I headed for the living room. When I opened the door, I saw my mother-in-law and Ben in the living room. Ahead of them, I saw a young woman wearing my precious apron and hurriedly cooking. When they noticed me, they all stood up and rattled their dishes in a panic. I, on the other hand, was extremely calm. You are Ben's mistress, aren't you? I know who you are. When I said this, the woman looked so surprised that she jumped up and said, "How do you know?" Yes, I knew Ben was cheating on me. I wanted to know why Ben, who had been so kind to me until then, had suddenly become so harsh. So I asked a detective agency to investigate. And there it was, the evidence of an affair. As I had expected, the timing of Ben's sudden cold shoulder coincided with the start of the affair. My mother-in-law probably asked or persuaded Ben to do it. She wanted him to be cold to me in order to get rid of me. It was a despicable way to go about it. I showed them the evidence I had saved on my phone, one by one. Then all three of them turned very pale. And Ben, for example, looked as if he was about to fall over. Ben must have realized that there was no excuse. He suddenly came up to me and took my hand.
I'm sorry, Lee, but you're the only one for me. You like me too, don't you? Well, I guess divorce is not an option. Let's just call it a double blowout. No alimony or anything, okay?
I stared coldly at Ben, who was trying to flirt with me, and shook his hand away. What? I don't even like you a little bit. In fact, I hate you. I will make sure you pay alimony and child support. And her too, of course. You'd better be ready for that, Mother. When I said that, my mother-in-law tried to come over to me in a panic. However, because of her broken bones, her leg became entangled and she fell down. She also seemed to have hit somewhere hard and was thrashing around on the floor. I don't know what she's doing. As I looked down at my mother-in-law, Ben's mistress finally came out of the kitchen and bowed to me. I'm sorry. Ben asked me out and I just couldn't say no. I'm sorry, so please forgive me. The woman wiggled around in my precious apron. She is a nasty woman. I see. If you really want me to forgive you, get down on your knees and apologize. Then I can think about whether to make you pay alimony. I told her in a cold voice. The woman made a disgruntled voice, saying, "What?" But Ben forced her to get down on her knees, and he got down on his knees next to her.
I'm sorry.
Ben looked up his face expectant. I stared at him for a few seconds. Well, I've thought about it. I'm not going to forgive you. Just make sure you have alimony and child support ready. With her mouth agape, I took off the apron from her. Then I left my parents-in-law's house, leaving everyone in a daze. A month later, Ben and I were officially divorced. Of course, I had to file for alimony and child support, which was to be paid in a lump sum soon, with a lawyer in between. But I had plenty of evidence of cheating and harassment, so everything went smoothly. Ben, however, was having a hard time giving up on his son. He tried to appeal to his son himself to choose him, but it didn't work. Even though his son was in elementary school, he seems to sense an unpleasant atmosphere from Ben and my mother-in-law, and he told him that he wanted to stay with me. He still gets their occasional unsolicited message on his cell phone, but he completely ignores them. Ben and his mistress were having an affair within the same workplace, to my surprise, and they have been many misses since then. According to what I heard, the affair between Ben and the woman had spread throughout the company, and as a result, both had to resign from their jobs. Ben temporarily moved into the woman's place, but since he was unemployed and they both paid alimony to me, they were left living in poverty. The woman, who couldn't stand it any longer, ran off with another man, so they seems to have broken up. Ben returned to his mother's house, but his mother and Ben blame each other for the incident. In a sense, they are like mother and son. They will have to live a lonely life together. They deserve it. Meanwhile, I have started living with my son with the support of my family. I felt sorry for my son to be transferred from the school he had attended for 6 years. So I rented an apartment in the school district where we had lived until this point, just for a few months until graduation. Recently, he has been able to settle down and get back to a more peaceful life. The other day, I went to an amusement park with my son for the first time in a long time, and he said to me, "Mom, I will protect you from now on." What a kind and gentle boy he is. I hugged my son, who looked embarrassed, and promised myself that I would protect him.